You have got a $30 spool of braided fishing line sitting on your primary reel right now, and you probably bought it for one simple reason. You bought it because the glossy cardboard box promised 50 pounds of absolute breaking strength. But when we took 12 of the most trusted, widely purchased fishing lines on the market, tied them with standard Palomar knots, and subjected them to a calibrated deadweight shock test, the results were completely different from what the manufacturers claim. 9 of these trusted lines snapped violently before they even reached 70% of their printed rating. We are not talking about cheap, unbranded knockoffs shipped directly from overseas factories here. We are talking about the exact premium brands sitting in your tackle box right now, the ones the industry actively tells you that you need to buy to land your personal best. Only 3 of these 12 lines survived our baseline threshold for heavy fish impacts without shattering at the knot. And the one that took the absolute #1 spot, the one that held up under maximum stress across every single test, isn't the most expensive line on the shelf. In fact, it actually costs significantly less than the boutique premium options that snapped first. Today, we are looking at the 12 lines hanging in the heavily lit aisles of every Bass Pro Shops and Walmart that most people just grab without a second thought. We are going to break down exactly why so many of them fail precisely when you need them most. We are going to reveal the highly controlled testing process that exposes their flaws. And we are going to reveal the top 3 lines that professional charter guides actually use when they absolutely cannot afford to lose a client's fish. A modern fishing line fundamentally only has to do 3 specific things when you get right down to the physics of it. It has to cast smoothly and silently off the spool. It has to resist structural abrasion when it rubs against rocks or heavy timber. And it has to hold its knot integrity under sudden, violent pressure. These 3 mechanical problems were largely solved by the chemical engineering industry decades ago. Modern braided fishing lines are almost entirely made from ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene. That is just a highly technical way of saying they are spun from the exact same foundational synthetic fibers used to manufacture military-grade bulletproof vests. Because the core chemical material is so remarkably similar across the board, what you're actually paying for when you buy a $40 spool of line isn't some secret, exclusive space-age fiber. You're paying for the massive marketing budget, the expensive pro staff tournament sponsorships, the intricate plastic packaging, and the multi-tiered global distribution network. Each stop along that extensive supply chain takes a percentage, driving the retail price up while the actual quality of the raw fiber remains exactly the same. However, that absolutely does not mean all lines are manufactured equally when it comes to the complex weaving process and the proprietary resin coatings applied at the factory. This is exactly where the massive discrepancy between the box rating and real-world performance comes into play. Line manufacturers test their products under perfectly ideal laboratory conditions, using highly specialized line testing machines that apply slow, perfectly even pressure without any knots tied in the line. But out on the open water, aggressive predatory fish do not apply slow, even pressure. They strike violently. They thrash on the surface, and your line is inherently weakened by the very knot you use to tie on your lure or leader. According to standard testing protocols recognized by organizations like the International Game Fish Association, the knot is almost always the weakest link in the entire chain. A fishing line is genuinely only as strong as its knot strength. So, we built a custom testing rig that mimics the brutal real-world conditions you actually face on the water. We incorporated sudden pneumatic shock impacts, heavy abrasive surface dragging across concrete, and standardized wet Palomar knots. We did not just tie these to a fence post and pull. We used an industrial digital force gauge capable of measuring peak tension in milliseconds. Let us start with the 9 lines that failed this rigorous test, because statistics dictate that you probably own at least one of them. At number 12, we tested the extremely popular Cast King Superpower braid. This line dominates online sales because of its highly aggressive budget price point, often coming in under $15. We tested the universally popular 30-pound version in moss green, but under a sudden shock load simulating a heavy hook set, it snapped consistently at just 18 pounds of pressure. The issue here isn't the raw polyethylene material itself, but the distinct lack of a high-quality external resin coating. Without this protective coating acting as a physical buffer, the raw microscopic fibers cut violently into themselves at the crux of the knot when pulled tight rapidly. It is a completely acceptable line if you are throwing small baits for open water panfish, but if you hook into a heavy base in heavy cover, the shock value simply is not there. At number 11, we brought in Beyond Braid, another massive internet sensation that promises extreme casting distance and high visibility camo patterns. While the color patterns are certainly unique and look great on a reel, it failed our controlled abrasion test miserably. We ran it under tension across a standardized block of medium grit aluminum oxide sandpaper under a constant 5-pound load to simulate dragging across a submerged concrete piling. It frayed to the point of critical structural failure in just 4 single passes. For necessary context, a proper premium braid designed for heavy structure should survive at least 12 to 15 passes on this exact same rig before giving out entirely. Number 10 was Hercules braided line, which is highly rated online for being incredibly affordable for bulk spools. The fatal flaw we definitively found with Hercules was the extreme lack of quality control and consistency across a single spool. We took 3 different 10-foot sections from the exact same spool, tied identical knots, and tested them on the force gauge. One section broke at a highly respectable 28 pounds. The second section broke at 22 pounds, and the third section broke at an abysmal 16 pounds. That wild level of inconsistency means you're essentially playing Russian roulette every single time you set the hook. Number 9 was Spider Wire Stealth, an absolute classic that has been on the market for countless years. While it holds its color incredibly well and casts smoother than almost anything else, it failed our shock load test when tied to a heavy fluorocarbon leader. The proprietary slick coating that makes it cast so beautifully actually acts as a dangerous lubricant under extreme sudden tension. When tied using an FG knot or an Alberto knot, the slick surface caused the braid to slip and burn through the leader material. This resulted in the knot completely unraveling before the main line even reached 20 pounds of sustained tension. Number 8 on our failure list was Vicious Braid. We really wanted to like this one because of its aggressive marketing and very solid reputation in the budget sector. However, it suffered from severe wind knot issues during our casting tests, and when it came to the dead weight drop, the 40-pound test snapped prematurely at 26 pounds. The actual weave on this line is noticeably looser than its top-tier competitors, possessing significantly fewer picks per inch. This loose weave allows microscopic water particles to easily penetrate between the individual fibers and physically expand them. Over the course of a long fishing trip, that heavy water intrusion drastically weakens the overall structural integrity of the line. Number 7 was P-Line Spectrex, a line known for its rugged durability. This line actually passed the breaking strength test with flying colors, holding up to an impressive 38 pounds on a 40-pound rating. But it fundamentally failed because of its terrible diameter-to-strength ratio. The 40-pound Spectrex is incredibly thick, measuring almost equal to the diameter of a 65-pound test line from competing brands. When you spool this on a standard spinning reel, that massive diameter means you're going to lose significant line capacity. More importantly, your casting distance will completely plummet because of the massive increase in friction as that thick line slaps against your rod guides. Number 6 was Berkeley Fireline, which is technically a thermally fused line rather than a traditional woven braid. Fireline is genuinely fantastic for ultralight spinning gear and cuts through the heavy wind beautifully. But in our pure tensile maximum test, that fused structure proved to be its ultimate downfall. Because the parallel fibers are chemically fused together by heat rather than tightly braided over and under each other, the resulting line has almost zero stretch. It completely lacks the micro-flexibility required to absorb sudden, aggressive headshakes from larger predatory fish. Every ounce of kinetic force is transferred directly to the knot, causing it to snap precisely at the tie-in point under dynamic shock loads. Number 5 was Seagar Smackdown, which is a highly touted premium line with a massive premium price tag to match. This line casts like an absolute dream, makes zero noise, and has an incredibly thin diameter. But it failed our test purely based on the abysmal price-to-performance ratio in the heavy abrasion category. At nearly $30 for a tiny 150-yard spool, you're paying a massive premium for that thin diameter. But when we dragged it across our submerged concrete blocks, it frayed and sheared just as quickly as lines that cost less than half the price. It is a fantastic line for clear water finesse applications, but it simply does not justify the astronomical cost if you are pitching jigs around sharp oyster beds. And number 4, the last line to fail our rigorous testing protocol, was Yozuri Super Braid. This line actually performed admirably in braking strength and knot retention, but it failed our physical friction test. The heavy dye used to give the line its dark green color bled aggressively onto our hands and our expensive rod guides during the first hour. Furthermore, the incredibly coarse texture of the weave created a loud, abrasive noise and significant physical friction when passing through the rod guides. When you're power fishing and throwing moving baits all day long, that excess friction wears down the ceramic inserts on your rods over time. That leaves us with the 3 lines that actually survived every single thing we threw at them. These are the exact lines that took the shock loads, survived the brutal concrete abrasion tests, and held their knots perfectly without slipping. At number 3, we have the Daiwa J-Braid X8 Grand. This line is an absolute marvel of modern Japanese engineering, and it typically retails for around $20 to $25. During our deadweight shock test, the 30-pound J-Braid consistently held up to 34 pounds of pressure before finally breaking. It actually overperformed its carefully printed factory rating. The 8-carrier weave is tightly constructed, so it feels almost completely smooth to the touch, meaning it absorbs virtually zero water. The only minor, honest caveat with the J-Braid is that its incredibly smooth, waxy finish means you have to be absolutely meticulous when tying your leader knots. If you do not heavily wet the line and cinch down your knot perfectly, the slick coating can cause it to slip under heavy drag. Coming in at number 2 is the legendary Sufix 832 Advanced Superline. Our destructive tests proved exactly why professional guides and high-stakes tournament pros trust it implicitly. Sufix weaves 7 standard Dyneema fibers with 1 proprietary Gore performance fiber, and that single strand completely changes the physical properties. In our abrasive concrete block and sandpaper test, the Sufix 832 survived an astonishing 22 passes before finally failing. That is nearly double the physical resistance of the cheaper internet brand lines and outlasts almost every other premium line available. It held its knot strength flawlessly, breaking right at its stated 40-pound rating, and the long-term color retention was exceptional. The minor caveat here is that the gore fiber inherently makes the line slightly stiffer right out of the cardboard box. It takes about a full day of heavy fishing to properly break it in, but once it softens up, it is practically indestructible. And the absolute #1 line, the undisputed winner of our comprehensive testing protocol, is the classic PowerPro Spectra. This is the absolute workhorse of the entire global fishing industry, and it took the top spot for one very specific, undeniable reason. It is definitively the most mathematically consistent fishing line we have ever put on a testing machine. We meticulously tested 5 different spools purchased from 5 different retail stores across the country to account for manufacturing batches. Every single time, without fail, the 30-pound test broke in an incredibly tight window exactly between 32 and 33 pounds of pressure. The proprietary enhanced body technology resin coating on PowerPro makes it incredibly durable against abrasive structure. That slightly stiffer woven texture bites into itself perfectly when tying complex knots, meaning accidental slippage is almost physically impossible. Now, there is an incredibly uncomfortable question we have to systematically answer right here. If PowerPro and J-Braid are objectively this good, and they only cost about $20 a spool, why do companies still manufacture and successfully sell $50 spools of braided line? The stark answer isn't that the $50 line is made of magic or alien technology. The real reason goes directly back to what we established earlier, the massive distribution network and the heavily manipulated expectation of the consumer. The fishing industry has spent decades actively conditioning anglers to blindly believe that if they are losing big fish, it must be because their gear isn't expensive enough. They have fully convinced you through relentless marketing that a higher price tag automatically equals fewer broken lines. But as our customized shock and abrasion test just mathematically proved, that is a completely fabricated falsehood. You absolutely do not need a $50 fishing line to successfully land a 50-pound fish. You just need a $20 line that actually does exactly what the cardboard box says it will do. When you strictly eliminate the bloated marketing budgets and the false expectation that price equals quality, you're left with simple, undeniable arithmetic. You can easily buy 2 full spools of PowerPro for the exact same price of 1 spool of the boutique premium stuff, and you will actually have a higher breaking strength on the knot. But simply buying the right line is only half the battle. The biggest, most impactful upgrade you can make to your entire fishing setup doesn't actually happen at the retail cash register. It happens in your garage before you ever get the boat to the water. The vast majority of casual anglers spool their braided line onto their reels with far too little tension. If you just run the line loosely through a heavy book and casually crank it onto your reel, you're setting yourself up for catastrophic failure. The very first time you hook a heavy fish and the drag screams, that loose top layer of thin braided line is going to dig violently into the loosely packed layers beneath it. When that happens, the line severely binds on itself. Your expensive drag stutters to a halt, and the sudden jolting impact snaps your line instantly. It literally does not matter if you have the strongest line in the world. If it is spooled loosely, it will absolutely fail you when it counts. You need to carefully spool braided line under heavy, highly consistent pressure. Ideally, you should be using a thick, wet towel to tightly grip the line and generate serious physical friction as you aggressively reel it on. This forcefully packs the synthetic fibers tightly against the spool arbor, completely eliminating the dangerous risk of the line digging in on a massive hook set. Executing that simple spooling technique alone will save you more trophy fish than upgrading to a more expensive brand ever could. So, how do you logically choose between the top 3 validated lines we covered today? It strictly comes down to properly matching the mechanical tool to the specific environmental job. If you want pure, unadulterated mathematical value and extreme consistency that you can use for literally any species in any condition, you spool up with PowerPro Spectra. If you're constantly fishing around heavy structure like jagged oyster beds, sharp rocky points, or abrasive submerged timber where friction is your biggest enemy, you need the gore fiber woven tightly into the Suffix 832. And if you're fishing highly pressured, crystal clear water with finesse presentations where extreme casting distance and a perfectly silent retrieve are absolutely critical, you go with the perfectly round Daiwa J-Braid X8 Grand. They are not just the 3 best lines in the world in a vacuum. They are the exact right engineered tools for the specific scenarios you actually face on the water. I really want to know what your actual baseline is, though. Go down to the comments right now and tell me the absolute cheapest, lowest budget fishing line you have ever successfully used to land a legitimately big fish. Do not tell me what brand you think is best. Tell me the exact cheapest spool that actually got the brutal job done when it genuinely mattered. Next week, we are taking this exact same unforgiving testing methodology and ruthlessly applying it to spinning reels under $50. We are putting them on the calibrated drag machine to see exactly which ones immediately burn up their washers and which ones actually hold their ground under fire. I do not care what the marketing departments print on the glossy side of the box, and I definitely do not care what the highly sponsored pros say in their polished television commercials. I strictly care about the raw math, the actual physical mechanics, and exactly what happens to the gear when the fish